stay committed to it.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
New map. All right, Colleen, what you got?
So Speaker Johnson has said that he would be willing to put forward Ukraine funding, Israel funding, once the shutdown situation is ended. I wondered if he has communicated that to the White House, if that's the White House's understanding, and how you think the proceeding will be.
So obviously we've seen those reports, and I'll say this, we've said repeatedly the House needs to move forward with the bipartisan national security supplemental, which, let's not forget, passed in overwhelming fashion in the Senate, and they need to put that on the floor. We know that if they put that on the floor, if the Speaker puts that on the floor, it would get overwhelming bipartisan support. We need to make sure that we continue to stand with Ukraine as it defends against Russia's brutal invasion. We have to continue to do that, to stand with them, to stand as they're fighting for their democracy, as they're fighting for their freedom. And it is, Ukraine is losing ground. You've heard us say this before. You've heard this from NSC. You've heard it from my colleagues. They're losing ground on the battlefield because Congress is not taking action. And so we need them to move. We need them to put that on the floor. We need that to happen as soon as possible. And we're going to continue to be very clear about that.
What happens, as American support for Ukraine funding continues to sort of degrade? What else can the White House do to articulate the importance of it?
Look, we're going to continue to speak to it. But here's the thing. In Congress, there's bipartisan support. There's overwhelming bipartisan support. We saw that in the Senate, and we know that to be true, to be a fact in the House. That's what we know. And so we have to, the president understands the important role that Americans play. We, as United States of America, we play a leading role in making sure that we're continuing to fight for democracy. And the president will speak to that directly to the American people, as he has in the past 2 years. We know, history shows us what happens if we do not stop a dictator. It shows us what happens. We know where we can end up. And so, and we understand, Americans understand that. They're smart enough to get that. And so Congress needs to move. They need to act. Their inaction is, leading to Ukraine losing ground in the battlefield. We heard that from the CIA director, the Big Four, when they were here meeting with the president. They heard that directly from the CIA director. It is unfortunate that the Speaker is putting politics ahead of what our role should be, which is fighting for democracy and making sure that Ukraine has what they need for them to fight for democracy. Yeah, Joe.
Thanks, Karine. Did the president have a chance to talk with Speaker Johnson at the luncheon today about Ukraine aid, and if so, what was his message?
I have to say I have not touched base with the president, so I do not know if they connected and if they did, what their conversation was. I don't have anything to share. We try to keep those conversations very private, obviously. What I will say, I don't think the president is always very clear what he says publicly and in private, right? Which is when it relates to, obviously, the national security supplemental, it needs to be put on the floor. The Speaker needs to do this. He didn't hear this just when the Speaker was here, the Big Four, meeting with the president and the vice president. He didn't hear it just from the president, right? He heard that from the other leaders as well, his counterparts, right? His peers in Congress. And they all agreed that we needed to move forward on this. So the president's it really doesn't matter because the president's been very clear. The Speaker needs to put the national security supplemental on the floor. It will get bipartisan support. It will get overwhelmingly bipartisan support.